Hello everybody, here we are today. We are going to be doing a season preview for the Seattle Kraken. Now before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel. That being said, let's get on into it. So obviously Seattle is looking to take a step forward in year 3 after a terrific second year that saw them just one series away from the Western Conference Final. Nonetheless, they were one series away from being one series away from the Stanley Cup Final after a terrible inaugural season. So, going forward, what should we see from them? First thing for me is whether or not the offense will see a bit of a regression. Last year, the Kraken finished 6th in the league, 4 goals for, and they were 4th in the league, 4 goals for per 60, which is basically just a extra way of saying that they were even better in terms of scoring rate than most of the league. 3 other teams are better than them. It is good, and also really impressive considering that their first year, they were like 29th or 30th in the league, 4 goals for. So obviously, basically going from the bottom to the top within one season. Now, the team is hoping to see a lot of those goals stick, or maybe even score more goals in this following season. But what do I think? I think we could see some bit of a regression here. MoneyPuck.com had them as the second highest 4 goals for above expected at 33.98 last season, which was just behind the St. Louis Blues, and basically means they scored about 34 more goals than they were expected to. HockeyViz has it at about 44 goals, which is a little bit of a difference, but essentially gets you to the same result. Seattle scored more goals than they were expected to last year. Is that going to be necessarily a problem? What does this all mean? It's not necessarily a problem, and it's not all necessarily just luck either. We talked before on this channel over and over and over again. Teams that get quality offensive chances or have good players, maybe they're good playmakers, they're good shooters, whatever the case is, they are able to usually outperform their expected goal total because, well, having a guy like Austin Matthews that's expected to have 35 goals ends up with 60 kind of makes sense. Have you seen his shots? Have you seen just where he's able to score? Things like that happen. However, I will say this, looking at the Kraken, I do worry that they could outperform their chances a little bit. You saw a guy like Jared McCann was their leading goal scorer last year, 40 goals for him, which was impressive. What's even more mind-blowing as he did that all while averaging just about 16 minutes, and that was after a 27-goal season the season prior. Can he repeat all this? I'm leaning towards no, and he kind of was the straw that stirred the drink for them. Here's why. He had the 6th highest goals for per 60 in the league last year, behind David Pastrnak, Connor McDavid, Tage Thompson, Braden Point, and Cole Caulfield. Now, exclude Caulfield out of that list. Not to say he's even a bad player, because he is young and, possibly well on the rise. I mean, that was an incredible year from him last year. But would you say that you would associate Jared McCann with Pastrnak, McDavid, Thompson, Braden Point? Probably not yet. Now, I've been a guy that's been high on McCann for a while now. Couldn't believe that Pittsburgh ended up letting him go. But again, a guy that does a lot with limited minutes and does a great job making the most of those opportunities. At the same time, though, I mean, to be up there with McDavid, Pastrnak, and Point, some of those guys, it just blows my mind. Thompson, 50-goal scorer. I don't know. That is just a lot to ask for him. However, I will say this. The depth that Seattle has with their forward group could definitely shoulder this load. Got to look at the fact Oliver Bjorkstrand just scored like 21 goals after a nearly 30-goal season. Maybe in his second year he feels the groove a little bit more. Guys like Andre Burakovsky ended up only playing about like half of the year for them with some injuries that he dealt with. So with this forward group getting better, especially from year 1, holy cow, this could be a group that is able to score more goals. But to say 4th in the league, that seems high for me. I am seeing them go down a little bit this year. We'll see if that affects their ability to pick up wins. So the second talking point is whether or not Vince Dunn can back up his new deal. Now, Dunn is coming off of a great season with a 64-point campaign and was rewarded after that season where he averaged over 23 minutes a night to be the top pairing #1 blue liner for Seattle going forward with a 4-year, nearly $30 million deal. I think we all view this now going forward that he is undoubtedly their best blue liner, that he's going to be playing a ton of minutes. Like people weren't already talking about that already for him. He's a guy that in St. Louis obviously was looking for more minutes, and in Seattle I think is getting them. And I'm saying now that you should probably be a little bit wary of another 60-plus point season every year, because points are random. You look at the fact that Dunn is a guy that isn't really known as a big-time goal scorer from the blue line. not like prime Burns or prime Carlson or anything like that. He is more of a guy that is a facilitator for the puck and ends up distributing the puck well. And for me, I think one thing that kind of sticks out from last season, he had 26 secondary assists out of his 50 assists. So basically, we've talked before on this channel, secondary assists are a little bit more random than primary assists. And with assists in general, you're basically relying on somebody else to get the puck in the back of the end of the net. So for that, I'll have to say that he's not a 20-goal scorer, at least not yet anyway, and relies a lot, especially last year, on those secondary assists. So it could be a little bit random in what we see from point basis year to year. You have to think, too, that with his opportunities, 23 minutes a night, that's nothing to scoff at. We certainly could be seeing him get 50 points a season or more. Maybe he gets a 70-point season. I really couldn't tell you. However, I will say, just be a little bit wary that those point totals may range from year to year. Doesn't necessarily mean that he is a bad player. It just means that maybe they've had a bad puck luck, or maybe the opposing goalies are just lighting it up for him. I will say one thing though, he did do a great job for his team when he was out there. Goals for percentage at 5-on-5 play, 61.31%. I know for a lot of people they're saying, well, that doesn't seem crazy high, but you got to think of it in hockey terms. The fact that whenever Dunn was out there at full strength, they were basically outscoring teams 3-2, which is good. And I think for him, he is going to be a guy that a lot of people will unfortunately throw his value offensively at him, but you have to look more at the underlying numbers. Unfortunately for Dunn, I don't think he's one of those guys. At the moment, he's that two-way stud. Will he ever be? I can't tell you, but I will say for Dunn, I do think he has value. I do think he is a key part of Seattle's blue line and just in general what they want to do. If he can have another big year, I think people will automatically feel better about this deal. If he has a bad year, even though the underlying numbers are kind of leaning in his favor, I think a lot of people that just look at the game logs are going to say he's terrible. He is got to be, one of the worst signings from this previous season. I'm not going to panic. I do think that he could absolutely be worth this deal. And with the cap rising, I don't think this is going to be one of those deals that you look at in a couple of years and say, wow, this is terrible. And the final talking point here is more of a fun one as I try to throw these in here, is whether or not Eeli Tolvanen can follow up his surprise season. Obviously, a former first-round pick for the Nashville Predators could not find consistent opportunities in Nashville, started to become a healthy scratch. They placed him on waivers. Seattle picked him up. He ended up being the thing that they struck gold on. 27 points in 48 games played. That would be on pace for a 46-point season. That would be good enough for 6th on the team. So maybe a 50-point season is on the way. I'm going to say personally, I'm excited to see how he does because, again, a guy that's got a lot of talent. Didn't seem like he fit very well in the Nashville. Seems like he could thrive potentially in Seattle. However, I will say a big thing for Tolvanen that they have to watch out for Seattle to keep him valuable, I think, is this. He is talented, I think, definitely, but I don't think he is top-end talent. I don't think he's a top-line player just yet. Possibly never will be, and that's okay. He is a middle six forward in my eyes. It really needs to be playing either middle six forwards, probably third-line guys in order to take advantage of this, and realistically need some time, maybe on their second power play unit, to get value. I mean, he's got a shot that a lot of people talked about going into the draft, and they still do talk about now. Maybe he scores 20 goals for them. Maybe he gets 50 points for them as a third-line player. That would just be terrific and a great story for the Kraken, obviously getting him off waivers, and for Tolvanen to be able to turn his career around when it seemed like a lot of people were starting to waiver on him. I don't know if last season will be a one-hit wonder for him, and it's just one of those things where they just struck it in the pan once and things were good. However, I am hopeful, and with the depth that Seattle has, I'd like to see him get an opportunity. Again, probably third-line guy, playing other third-line guys, and I think he'd be able to make the most of it. Will he get 50 points this year? I'm going to say no, but I am hopeful. So now let's get into my overall thoughts on the team. Overall, the Seattle Kraken are a team that came off of a great year. They were just there, almost there for the Western Conference Final. What now? Well, for me, I do think that they should be in the playoff hunt. A lot of teams out West, I think, should be in the playoff hunt. Whether or not they are able to claim a spot in the top three of their division remains to be seen. Obviously, Vegas, coming off of their Stanley Cup Final, I would like to think would be able to make it into the top three. Edmonton really going to be pushing to stay up there. And then you have the other teams that are in their division that are going to make it hard. But for Seattle, I kind of look at them as an interesting team that kind of reminds me of LA. They've got these forwards that aren't necessarily all game changers, but they are interesting. But I think for them, they have guys that I'm so excited to see if Shane Wright gets more opportunities. You got Beniers, you got Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand, some older guys that are still valuable. McCann that is coming off of a great year, and just so many things for the team that I'm so excited for. Cartier, obviously part of the playoffs there for them. Can Dunn back it up? What's going to happen in net? The possibilities for how Seattle's season will go are endless. If the offense sputters, we could see a problem. But if the offense is able to do relatively well this year, I do think Seattle should be in the hunt. And I am excited to see if year 3 is more like year 2, or if we see a move to year 1. But anyway, what are your thoughts for the Seattle Kraken going into this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and you go off hockey all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.